My mother and daddy had been married a year when I was born because they were both sort of old when they got married. I was the first baby in that family for many, many years. So the whole crowd was excited about it. All my first cousins were much old, almost old enough to be my parents. So everybody was excited, and I'm sure I was a small little girl as I had all these people clucking over me all the time. Annie, for whom I was named, of course, had no children. And I hardly knew the difference between her and my mother because we lived next door. And Nanny would say, "You want to eat supper with us tonight?" And I would say, "Well, what are you going to have?" Then I'd find out what Mother was going to have. And I'd eat well. I liked the meal best. My mother's family was 6 girls, and 2 of them I never knew. They died before I was born. But my mother's oldest sister, Margaret, Sister Mag, we called her, lived in Wilson. And I used to visit her every summer and had a wonderful time and made a lot of lifelong friends in Wilson because I went every summer. Then Nanny, the one whom I was named for and lived next door, was the next one. And then Hattie, Aunt Hattie, we called her Hap. And then my mother was the youngest girl, and they finally had a boy, Henry Bridgman, who died at a young age of TB. He died out in Colorado, and he was married, but he had no children. So that was the end of the Bridgmans as far as the name going on. And my grandfather Bridgman was a loved and respected gentleman in Washington. He started the Bank of Washington there and was first president. We had the best time walking to school. They'd start 2 or 3 blocks down, and by the time they got to my house, there would be 5 or 6, and then we'd pick them up as we went along. And by the time we got to school, there'd probably be 10 of us walking together, and we had a good time walking back and forth. And I used to, when I was in the elementary school, I used to ride my bicycle to school every day. And I guess I outgrew that or something. Anyway, I walked to high school, which was on the corner of Bridge and 2nd Street in Washington. And now, I don't think you could get a kid to walk that far to school. They would feel like they had to be driven there. But we had a good time doing it. Washington always had really good basketball teams. We played Greenville one year and beat them 74-0. And nobody believed that until and I've got the paper to show it because it was unheard of for a team not to score. And that happened. That was my junior year in high school. And boy, the next year, Greenville was ready for us. That was the only game we lost my whole high school career was to Greenville the next year.
I've got a crush on you, sweetie pie.
I met your dad. Of course, we were kidding, you know that. And his mother, I had met his mother and his sister Grace at family reunions. We used to have a family reunion in Greenville every year at Cousin Rosa's. But Charles, I guess, was too old. If he'd ever been to one, I didn't remember it. But I went to Williamson to work for the WPA incident. I was with the library project. It was a supervisory thing. And that's when I met him, and we started going out in the crowd, and first thing you know, we were dating, and the rest, as they say, is history.
I've got a crush, my baby, on
you. It was during the war. I was working down at Cherry Point, and I got a job there before the base was even built. The offices were in Newbern. before anything was built down on the base. And then, of course, we moved down there as they built office buildings. And your daddy used to go, he didn't have a car, so he'd borrow a car from Chick or James and somebody and come to see me all that way. And then he, this was 1941, I guess. Then he went in the FBI, and I kept on working in Cherry Point, and then I got so tired. I didn't live there. I drove back and forth from Washington every day. And I got tired of that drive, so I stopped. And then they started building a base in Edenton, and I went there to work. And I worked for Mr. Stewart, who was the assistant manager down at Cherry Point, and he asked me if I'd come there and work. So I lived in Edenton for a little while, too. And that's when I got the letter from your daddy asking me to marry him. And it said, in part, I want you to give this a lot of thought. But if it takes longer than right this minute, forget it. But it didn't take me longer than a minute to decide. So that's typical of your daddy's humor. He was in the FBI then, and he was going to get a transfer. And if it was to the East Coast, maybe he could get a day or two off and come home. If it was west, then I was going to have to go meet him. He was in Little Rock, Arkansas. And as it happened, he got transferred to Philadelphia. So we got a weekend off, and we had to very hurriedly plan the wedding because we didn't have time to make any arrangements. So we just had nothing but family at the wedding and 2 or 3 of his good buddies from Williamston. And we got married at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he didn't have a car, and Uncle James loaned us his car. And of course, this was during the war too, when you did not have much gas. Everybody saved gas for us. And we went and spent the night in Raleigh at Robert Cowan's apartment at the Carolina Hotel, and went to a Duke Wake Forest football game the next day. And Wake Forest won, by the way, so that was a good day. Then we got on the train, it came back to Rocky Mount, got on the train and went to Philadelphia. My early days cooking do not exist. If your daddy hadn't known how to cook, we would have starved to death, because he knew a lot about cooking, because incidentally, when he went to Wake Forest, he had $25 in his pocket that Uncle James had given him. And that was the extent of his cash. And so he got a job the minute he got there at Miss Lula Dunn's boarding house. And also he was his mother's youngest boy, so he had helped his mother in the kitchen some. I think he had seen her cook, and I don't know that he had actually done any, but he had been around the kitchen, which I had not. And by working at Miss Lula's, he got to know more about it. Of course, he did some cooking, so he really knew. He got us started cooking. In fact, I would go to the grocery store and I wouldn't see anything I thought I could cook except a piece of ham that all you had to do was put it in the pan and heat it a little. And that's what we had for 3 or 4 days at nights. And finally, Daddy called and said, "Don't do a thing till I get home." And he came home with some pieces of chicken and fried them. Oh, that fried chicken was the best thing we ever had. It was such a change. I gradually got so I could cook a little. Well, I'll tell you, I was a little green country girl. I'd never been anywhere. I'm not sure I'd ever been north of Raleigh. Anyway, Winston-Salem. But I got me a city map, and I learned my way around pretty good. I learned how to get on the subway and the elevated railroad, and I got along pretty good. And also the agents' wives had a luncheon once a month, so I got to meet some ladies that way that became real good friends, and we all got together real often. They had to tell people a lot of times. There was surveillance. There was a big German population in Philadelphia, and he used to go to some Bunt meetings. Of course, not as an agent, but disguised. And in fact, I remember he had to take his wedding ring off. He would sometimes have to go out of town for a couple of days, and he could not tell me where he was going. He could not even call, tell me anything. So I just had to sit there and wait until he got back. Celia was born in Philadelphia in 1945, January 4th. Incidentally, she was due Christmas Eve. And the doctor said to me, well, you're not going to get an income tax deduction this year, I don't think. So anyway, she's born the 4th of January. And I got along grand. And of course, in those days, which is unbelievable now, but they kept you in the hospital over a week. I think I stayed 9 days in the hospital. I stayed an extra day because the snow was so deep. I had a red-headed Irish white lady named Miss Gregg. The reason I say white lady, so many baby nurses were black ladies at that time, but Miss Gregg was really good, and she was with me. And then Mother came up after Miss Gregg. Mother wanted to come, and I said, no, wait until, I didn't want her to have to come and work. And oh, well, they ever proud of that first baby. Just like I was the first one, Celia was the first grandchild. And somebody said to Charles' mother, oh, Blanche, I know you're so thrilled about this child. And I said, well, this is number 14 for her. I don't know how thrilled she is about that. But I'm sure she was, because I've got number 8 now, and I'm thrilled about all of them, so.
Nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the morning.
When we got married, I had always called his mother Cousin Blanche. And I thought, this isn't gonna do, call my mother-in-law Cousin Blanche. So I had the hardest time. And he said, well, call her Mama. Well, that wasn't real easy. I mean, I loved her, I didn't object to that. But it was kind of hard to say Mama. The Manning family is unusual in that all 7 children still lived in Williamston. And they would go around to Mama's house every Sunday afternoon, and she would always have at least 2 cakes there. Well, it would take that many for all the crowd. And when Celia was about, I guess, 4, no, she wasn't that, well, she was just talking good. And we were around there, and Mama brought out the cakes for everybody, and Celia said, my mama made a cake one time. I could have killed her because all the Mannings baked cakes all the time. And the main time I ever made one was when somebody had a birthday, and that was it. But it was nice, and not only did all the children live in Williamston, they all lived within 2 or 3 blocks of each other. And I'll tell you something about the Manning family. They were real close, but I never saw any bickering or any animosity of any kind. I mean, there was never any jealousy shown about when somebody got a car or whatever. Just a really good family to be in. So I inherited a lot of in-laws and nieces and nephews and all that I've always felt very close to.
I'd make a wish, and here's what I'd say. Nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the AM. Carolina in the morning.
I had a wonderful life in Williamson, and funny thing though, growing up in Washington, we played basketball in Williamson, and I used to think, boy, what a rinky-dink little place this is. I would sure hate to live there. Little did I know I'd end up there, but I love living there. We live a block from the church and a block from the high school and 2 blocks from the elementary school. And children could walk downtown, and they could walk to Gravois Street and go to Dillon's and get Coca-Cola in the afternoon. And the boys and girls could ride bicycles to see all their friends. It was wonderful. And it's a whole different world now, in that we never worried about kids going off on the bicycle to another part of town. There was just no worry about it. I don't ever remember being bored a day in my life living with Charles Manning.
Charlie, my boy, you thrill me, you chill me with shivers of joy. You've got that kind of sort of bit of a way that makes me, takes me, tell me what shall I say. And when we dance, I read in your glance whole pages and ages of love and romance.
They tell me Romeo was some lover too, but boy, he should have taken lessons from you.
Up lazy river by the old mill run, lazy river in the...
I love Pamlico, but I hadn't been in many years. And Dr. Rhodes in Williamson, who was a good friend, your daddy was his lawyer, but more than that, they were just real good friends. I'm talking about old Dr. Rhodes Sr. And he had some property down there, and he gave your daddy a lot. And that's how we happened to build down there. We really hadn't thought about it. Our house was built, your daddy sketched off plain, and we didn't have a regular builder or an architect in the... Our cottage was very rustic. It didn't even have finished walls. We finally put up some plywood, some sheetrock, and painted it, but for a long time it wasn't even closed in. It was just very rustic. And the first year we built, there was no electricity. And so we had lanterns, and we had a pump in the kitchen, and the room that ended up being the bathroom is when Celia was a baby, so her crib was in that room, was her room. And then we knew they were getting electricity, so the next summer we had lights and running water. Pamlico was really, in the first place, it is a perfect place to have young children. The water's completely safe, and we had a rowboat. Then a little later we had a outboard motor, not a fast thing, but enough to pull skis. And your daddy spent many an hour on the Pamlico River trying to pull kids skiing.
I ain't going your way. Get out of my way.
I loved having the family. I think it really started when we built our place at Pamlico Beach, and so it started having the whole family there for the 4th of July. And we would have anywhere from 20 to, I think a couple of times we had mid-30s and even maybe 42 or 3 a time or two. Right now it blows my mind to think about feeding that crowd of people, but it worked out fine. I'd cook a country ham, and your dad would get up at break of day to start frying chicken. And we'd put all the nieces and nephews to work, shucking corn and peeling potatoes, and they'd fuss, Uncle Charles, do we have to do? Yes, you have to do that. And the truth is they loved doing it, because Charles had a way of designating work that made you feel like, oh, isn't this wonderful? And I used to tell him he could have run General Motors because he gave orders enough to, in a nice way.
Just begun to get our share of this world's delight. side.